Back in the early days of The Walking Dead, fans could often be divided into two distinct teams, being Team Rick and Team Shane. Viewers of the show often debated which man was better when it came to their survival instincts, leadership qualities, and even combat proficiency. And quite often, Shane Walsh came out as the winner in the court of public opinion, especially when it came to survival instincts and even leadership qualities. This was so prevalent that people often claimed, rather correctly, that Shane was ahead of the curve insofar as survival instincts and ethics was concerned. But does that really mean that Shane was better than Rick overall? I don't believe that to be the case. You know what, let's take a deep look at these characters and let's compare and contrast their qualities and actions. That way we can find a definitive answer to this nostalgic Walking Dead question. Let's begin with something as basic as each character's signature weapon, being Shane's Mossberg 590 and Rick's Colt Python. In terms of stopping power and even penetrating power, Shane's shotgun is far more effective than Rick's Magnum revolver, especially if this powerful metal death stick is utilizing slug rounds. The Mossberg also has a greater ammunition capacity, potentially holding 10 to 20 shells, compared to the Colt Python's 6 rounds. The Python may be more accurate at range, but that could certainly change depending on the ammunition type utilized by the Mossberg. At melee range, the Mossberg is also better than a mere sidearm, as the shotgun can be used as an effective blunt force weapon. In fact, the only advantages that the Python has is in its portability, its concealment factor, and how fucking cool it is. All in all, Shane's signature weapon is far superior to Rick's. When it comes to hand-to-hand combat skills, Rick initially lost to Shane in the episode 18 Miles Out, but that fight technically had 2 rounds and Rick definitely won the second round, despite Shane's more muscular and athletic build. Both Rick and Shane also have similar training in law enforcement. Hell, they both served under the same agency. As such, it makes sense that both men would be tied in this regard. Both men are capable of disarming human opponents, and both men seem decently proficient at grappling. That being said, I'd like to tag out and let my good friend Theo cover this category in more detail.
Hello, and a big thank you for having me on this channel, Captain Gold. The debate of who's a better survivor between the two sheriffs has divided the fanbase for years. So, let's get into which character is more equipped to survive this post-apocalyptic landscape. Starting off with hand-to-hand combat, Rick and Shane, as previously mentioned, trained in the same sheriff's department, so they therefore have a very similar background within this field. However, I feel like Shane takes the edge in this category. His more robust and compact build means he hits hard and he fights dirty, which leads to him getting the upper hand in combat. So, let's address the elephant in the room and actually analyse the fight they had against each other in Season 2, Episode 8, titled 18 Miles Out. Although Rick initially lands some good hits on Shane, Shane quickly overpowers him and pushes him to the ground, and then pushes a motorcycle onto Rick's leg. At this point, Rick is down and vulnerable, but instead Shane walks away to try and shoot a tied up Randall before Rick attacks him from behind and the brawl continues. Although this fight ultimately ends a draw as they were rudely interrupted by some walkers, I think there are multiple points in which Shane could have killed Rick in this incident, and even when Rick attacks Shane from behind, he once again manages to subdue him and push him down. So for me, Shane is a superior fighter, but hey, at least Rick put up more of a fight than Ed Peltier did.
You know what, I gotta agree with my buddy here. Shane definitely has an advantage in hand-to-hand when we look at it more carefully. But what about skill in a shootout? Prior to the apocalypse, both Shane and Rick had very little experience in firefights against armed adversaries. When Rick initially got shot in his bulletproof vest, both men seemed completely surprised, as if this was their first true challenge in the line of duty. But as soon as the apocalypse began, Rick quickly became more experienced in combat against the living. This is exemplified when he demonstrated a master class in the escalation of force against the mentally obese David and Tony. Shane, on the other hand, has zero experience against human opponents during the apocalypse, with his only kill being a case of necessary friendly fire against an unprepared and exhausted land whale at point-blank range. Clearly, Rick has the edge in any gunfight, at least in terms of raw skill and experience. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that Ricky Doodog Grimes literally has aimbot. Rick was also far more tactically sound, helping to discover the Walker Guts camouflage technique, something that Shane didn't know about. Rick was also the one who suggested to Shane the importance of using bladed weapons to preserve ammunition, and to also reduce the risk of attracting walkers. Rick was also far more cunning when he needed to be, as he managed to outsmart an insane Shane who had a serious advantage over him. To be fairly blunt, Rick in the early seasons was a far better combatant and tactician than Shane. And this is partially the case because Rick was always out on the field of battle, whereas Shane spent most of his time at camp. When it came to leadership skills or qualities, it was abundantly clear that Rick was better than Shane. His decision to go back for Merle not only secured multiple guns for the group, but it also won Daryl's loyalty, thus vastly improving the group's cohesion. While Shane was partially correct about the need for manpower to be present at the camp, the group simply would not have had the firepower needed to clear the barn if not for Rick's mission back into Atlanta. Rick also valued the importance of democratic input, even when he eventually became the Rictator. That being said, Rick's amicable attitude was an impairment when it came to Herschel, at least prior to the barn incident. Shane's willingness to be decisive when a problem needed to be eliminated resulted in the termination of a serious threat to the group's survival.
Next, I'd like to talk about the leadership traits of the two characters. This isn't even an argument, and I think Rick clearly comes out on top here, as Shane is a hopeless leader, and his decisions would have most likely got the group killed countless times, such as his borderline obsession with going to Fort Benning, which we later learn has been overrun by the dead. On the other hand, Rick's decision to go to the CDC didn't fix anything long term. However, the resources they gained and the knowledge they also learned about the outbreak in their short stay there was invaluable and was also the right decision. Let's also take the farm for example. Although Rick didn't agree with Herschel's philosophy about there being a cure for the virus, he went along with gathering walkers in the barn. And yes, this is most definitely an unsafe way of going about things, but it ultimately led to the group being able to stay at the farm and having access to clean water and not going hungry, something that isn't readily available in this world. I mean, we saw how much the group struggled after the events of the farm, so I think Rick ultimately made the right decision for the well-being of the group. This is a decision we see Shane ultimately disagree with, however he is right, but the way he went about things is concerning. Without Rick, Shane and the group most definitely get kicked off the farm, and knowing Shane, he wouldn't go down without a fight. Shane would most likely try and take the farm by force, which would definitely end up in unnecessary deaths amongst the group. Shane is also very vocal about only caring about the well-being of Laurie and Carl, another reason he is not fit to lead a group. So for that reason, this category results in a landslide victory for Officer Friendly.
In terms of survival instincts, as mentioned by the ever so talented Theo, Shane also wanted to go to Fort Benning, which was nearly 117 miles away from Atlanta. It was literally confirmed by the dynamic duo of stupidity, Dave and Tony, that said location had been completely overrun by the undead. Whereas Rick argued that it would be smarter to head to the CDC, and he was partially right. The CDC fed the group and kept them safe temporarily, while also granting Rick some intel on the nature of the wildfire virus. I mean, sure, the Atlanta group almost got cooked at the CDC by the pro-mortalist Dr. Jenner, but had the group trekked all the way to Fort Benning, they all surely would have died, or at the very minimum, would have suffered severe casualties. But when it came to the hunt for Sophia, Shane was absolutely right in claiming that Rick had been needlessly risking lives. He was absolutely right about the barn incident as well, albeit he sort of broke some eggs making that omelet. Shane was also right about the need to have guns on the farm, and he was right to assert that Randall could not be trusted. His instinct to survive in the new world was better adapted than Rick's, who was still applying the ethics of civilization to an uncivilized world. The right choice in a state of survival is always the one that keeps the group alive, so long as said decision is not needlessly cruel to the point where the action should not be committed. Shane understood the importance of training everyone on firearm use as well, and Shane was also intelligent enough to understand that the farm wasn't really safe. Time after time, Shane was demonstrated to have the best mindset for the cruel world of survival within a walker-infested planet. But he did not have the strength to live with what needed to be done. The strain of the new world eventually caused him to go mental. He couldn't live with killing Otis. He couldn't put down a zombified Sophia, nor could he mercy kill Dale. He was ultimately unable to kill his best friend, and he couldn't even live with the reality that Lori picked Rick over him. I mean, he even admitted to Rick that Lori and Carl saved him because he seemingly did not want to live in the new world. Shane was also shown to be emotionally impulsive, which could get him and the rest of the group killed. Rick, on the other hand, was cold and precise. He did not lose himself when he killed Dave and Tony. He didn't lose himself when he put down the zombified Sophia. He did not lose himself when he killed his best friend. Now, Rick certainly needed help when it came to Dale, but Rick also had a more robust support group, one that existed precisely because of his leadership qualities. After the death of Shane, Rick adopted the darker elements of Shane and discarded the weaknesses. One could not say that Shane would have managed to do the same had he gotten away with killing Rick. Losing Lori at the prison would have set Shane down the path of no return, where he certainly would be too far gone. Hell, he was already too far gone when he opted to assassinate Rick. But that's enough of my input. Let me tag out so my friend Theo can give you his take.
And finally, on a more general consensus, who is a better survivor? We see Shane almost haunted by the death of Otis, and he struggles to live with the fact, and it starts to eat him alive. Shane becomes unhinged, which ultimately results in his death. I think Rick can not only deal with death, but move past it, as we especially see this in later seasons. Rick is also smarter than Shane, as we see Rick outsmart him even in Shane's very last moments. And I think in conclusion, Rick is quite considerably more adapted to survive this world. Although Shane's survival instincts were ahead of the curve, he ultimately lacks the other attributes in order to not just survive, but thrive. And when asked who's the better survivor, I think the show depicts this, as only one of these characters survives, and that character not only survives, but in fact thrives. And that character is, of course, Rick Grimes. A massive thanks to Captain Gold for having me on the channel. If you guys would like to see how Shane changed Rick forever, then you can head to my channel after watching this amazing video.
Yo, I'm back. Now seriously consider checking out Theo's channel. He's got some marvelous content and he certainly deserves more subs. If you like my videos, you'll surely enjoy his as well. Anyways, let's get back to it. While Shane's survival instincts were ahead of the curve, he was too weak to live by the rules of the new world. And when it came to every other variable, aside from signature weapons and hand-to-hand combat, Shane was simply Rick's inferior. That's right, Officer Friendly was legit better than Shane Walsh overall. Be that as it may, had Shane not gone insane, the two would have been a formidable force. Whereas Dale, and later on Herschel, was the proverbial angel on Rick's shoulder, Shane was the proverbial devil. Being Rick's shadow, he possessed qualities that covered Rick's own weaknesses. Every group needs a balanced and capable leader like Rick fucking Grimes, but every leader needs an enforcer like Shane Walsh. Anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, and fucking subscribe. Also hit that notification icon, that way you may be notified when I publish a new video. Remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined, down in the comments section. I'm Captain Gold and hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.